Your daughter ruined my son." The Duchess smiled. "Good. Now he has to marry her." The morning light fell through the tall windows of Sinclair House in pale golden sheets, illuminating dust motes that danced above the breakfast table, where Arabella Sinclair was attempting to convince her youngest brother that marmalade did not, in fact, belong on kippers. "But I like it," Thomas said, with all the stubborn certainty of his 11 years. "You like many things that aren't good for you." Arabella rescued the marmalade pot before he could commit further culinary atrocities. "Frogs in your pockets, climbing the old oak despite being told not to, that ghastly penny dreadful you think I don't know about." Thomas's eyes went wide. "How did you—" "I know everything, Thomas. It's my particular curse." She softened the words with a smile and passed him the toast rack instead. "Eat properly. Father wants to speak with us all after breakfast, and you'll need your strength for whatever tedious announcement he's planning." Across the table, her sister Louisa looked up from the letter she'd been reading for the 3rd time that morning, a letter from her school friend in London, full of breathless descriptions of balls and gowns and eligible young lords. At 18, Louisa possessed the kind of delicate blonde beauty that painters begged to capture, all roses and cream and wide blue eyes that saw the world as a fundamentally romantic place. She was everything Arabella was not. Soft where Arabella was practical, dreamy where Arabella was grounded, effortlessly lovely where Arabella was merely striking in ways that made people uncomfortable. "Do you think it's about the season?" Louisa asked, hope making her voice rise. "Father did promise." "Father promises many things." Arabella kept her voice carefully neutral. She absolutely would not, feel envious that her sister was about to have the season she herself had never been offered. Someone had needed to stay home 5 years ago when their mother died, and Arabella had been the obvious choice. Someone had needed to raise Thomas and manage the household, and ensure that their father remembered to eat and sleep, and occasionally speak to his children between business ventures. That someone had been Arabella, and she did not regret it. She didn't. The door to the breakfast room opened, admitting their father and their middle brother Edward, who at 16 had developed the unfortunate habit of speaking almost entirely in Latin quotations he'd learned at school. Marcus Sinclair was a tall man running slightly to stoutness, with the weathered hands of someone who had started life in a textile mill and the sharp eyes of someone who now owned several. His marriage to Lady Catherine Whitmore, 3rd daughter of an impoverished baron, had been a scandal 25 years ago. Now it was merely a footnote to his success, the merchant who had married a lady and made himself respectable through sheer force of will and an unerring instinct for profitable investments. "Good morning, my dears." He kissed Louisa on the forehead and ruffled Thomas's hair before taking his seat at the head of the table. His gaze found Arabella last, as it often did, with the particular look he reserved for her alone gratitude and guilt in equal measure. "You look tired, Bella." "I'm perfectly well, Father." "You were up late with the household accounts again. Mrs. Henderson mentioned it." "Mrs. Henderson should focus on her own accounts and leave mine in peace." But Arabella smiled to take the sting from her words. "What did you wish to discuss?" Marcus Sinclair helped himself to eggs and kidneys before answering, drawing out the moment with obvious pleasure. He was a man who enjoyed his small theatrics, perhaps because he had spent so many years being told he was too common for drama. "I have concluded," he said finally, "a business arrangement with the Duke of Ashworth." Louisa's gasp was audible. Even Edward looked up from his breakfast, Latin forgotten. The Duke of Ashworth was not merely wealthy. Wealth alone would not have impressed the Sinclairs, who had plenty of their own. He was ancient. His family had come over with the Conqueror, had survived the Wars of the Roses and the Civil War, and the various upheavals of centuries by being too rich and too clever to fall. The Ashworths were everything the Sinclairs aspired to and could never quite reach. Respectability so deep it had fossilized into stone. A partnership in the textile ventures? Arabella asked, practical as always. That would make sense, given his interests in Manchester. More than a partnership. Her father was practically glowing. A joint venture. We'll be supplying exclusive fabrics for his various properties, the estate houses, the London residence, everything. It's worth a fortune, Bella, but more than that, it's worth legitimacy. When the Duke of Ashworth does business with Marcus Sinclair, no one can call us mere merchants anymore. They'll still call us that, Arabella said quietly, just not to our faces. Arabella. There was warning in her father's voice. I'm sorry, father. That was unkind. She wasn't sorry, and they both knew it, but some lies were necessary for household peace. What does this arrangement require of us? Ah. And here her father's expression shifted to something she recognized all too well, the look he wore when he was about to ask her to sacrifice something for the good of the family. The Duke has invited us to stay at his London townhouse for the season, all of us. Louisa will make her debut under the sponsorship of the Duchess herself. Louisa made a sound that was not quite a shriek, but was certainly not dignified. The Duchess! Oh, father! Oh, Arabella! Can you imagine? The Duchess of Ashworth presenting me. Every door in London will open. Every— Yes, darling, we understand the implications. Arabella's voice was dry. Father, am I to understand that we will be guests in their home for the entire season, living in their house? The townhouse is massive, apparently. An entire wing for our use. You'll barely know they're there. And what am I to do while Louisa conquers society? The question came out sharper than she'd intended. Arabella saw her father wince and immediately felt guilty. I only mean I'm not making my debut. I'll be chaperoning Louisa, presumably. But beyond that, you might enjoy yourself. Her father reached across the table to touch her hand. You've worked so hard, Bella, for so many years. Perhaps this season you might let someone else manage things for a while. The Duchess has a full staff. Mrs. Henderson can handle matters here. You could rest. Rest. As if she knew how. As if she could simply stop being the person who held everything together and become someone who attended parties and made small talk and didn't lie awake at night wondering if she'd remembered to order more candles. Of course, father, she said, because that was what she always said. It sounds lovely. The London townhouse of the Duke of Ashworth was not, as Arabella's father had suggested, massive. It was obscene. 4 stories of pale Portland stone rising above Grosvenor Square, with more windows than she could count, and an entrance hall larger than the entire ground floor of Sinclair House. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, paintings that looked suspiciously old and masterful, a small army of servants in livery so crisp it could have cut glass. Thomas for once was silent, struck dumb by grandeur. Edward muttered something in Latin that Arabella suspected was inappropriate. Louisa had gone so pale that her freckles stood out like constellations. Only their father seemed at ease. But then, Marcus Sinclair had spent 30 years refusing to be intimidated by his betters. Mr. Sinclair, the butler, tall, silver-haired, with the bearing of a general and the expression of a man perpetually disappointed in humanity, inclined his head precisely 15 degrees. The family is expected. I am Pemberton. I will show you to your rooms. The Duke? Marcus asked. Away on business in the north. He sends his regrets and expects to return within the fortnight. The Duchess is in residence and will receive you for tea at 4 o'clock. 3 hours to unpack, settle, and prepare to meet a woman who could make or break Louisa's entire future with a single raised eyebrow. Arabella's head was already beginning to ache. Their wing of the house was, she had to admit, beautiful. 4 bedrooms, a private sitting room, a small study that her father immediately claimed, and a view over the back gardens that could have graced any painting. Arabella's room was decorated in soft greens and creams, with a writing desk by the window and a bed large enough to fit her entire family. It was elegant and tasteful and utterly impersonal, and she felt like an intruder in every corner. She unpacked her own things she'd refused to bring her maid, insisting Mrs. Henderson needed her more than Arabella did, and then went to help Louisa choose an appropriate dress for tea. Her sister was in a state of nervous excitement that expressed itself in holding up gowns and then immediately discarding them, until the bed was buried in silk and muslin, and Arabella's patience was buried with it. "The blue," she said finally, rescuing a demure afternoon dress from the pile. "It brings out your eyes and suggests innocence without being childish. You'll wear the pearl earrings, mothers, and minimal jewelry otherwise. Your hair up but soft. You want to look fresh, not fussy." "What will you wear?" Louisa asked. Arabella looked down at her own grey travelling dress, practical and neat and utterly forgettable. "Something similar. It doesn't matter for me." "Of course it matters. You're pretty, Bella, when you make an effort. Those green eyes and that hair, if you'd just— I'm not the one being presented." Arabella's voice was gentle but final. "Today is about you, Louisa. About making a good impression on the Duchess. I'll fade into the background where I belong, and you'll shine. That's how this works." Louisa's face fell. "That's not how it should work." "Perhaps not, but it's how it does." The Duchess of Ashworth was not what Arabella had expected. She'd prepared herself for coldness, for aristocratic disdain, for the particular breed of condescension that old money reserved for new. What she got instead was a small, sharp-eyed woman in her late 50s, with steel-grey hair, excellent posture, and a smile that suggested she found the entire world privately amusing. "So," the Duchess said, after the introductions had been made and tea had been served in a drawing-room decorated with more restraint than the entrance hall had suggested. "You are the Sinclairs?" "We are, Your Grace." Marcus was on his best behaviour, all charm and deference. "I've heard a great deal about you, Mr. Sinclair. My husband says you're the most ruthlessly competent businessman he's ever met, which from him is high praise indeed. He also says you're honest, which is considerably rarer and considerably more valuable." Her gaze swept over the family, lingering on each face. "Your son Edward is at Harrow, I understand. Thomas will follow, both receiving the education of gentlemen. Good. And Miss Louisa?" Louisa, to her credit, managed a curtsy that didn't wobble. "Your Grace." "Pretty," the Duchess observed, as if commenting on a horse at auction. "Blonde, blue-eyed. The ton will eat you alive if you're not careful. Can you dance?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Speak French?" "Passably, Your Grace." "Play the pianoforte?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Have a single original thought in your head that you're not afraid to express?" Louisa hesitated. The Duchess's eyes gleamed. "I think," Louisa said slowly, "that I have many thoughts, Your Grace, but I've been taught that ladies don't express them in company." "Then you've been taught wrong." The Duchess turned her attention to Arabella, who had been standing slightly behind her sister, trying to be invisible. "And you, Miss Arabella Sinclair, the spinster." Arabella felt her spine stiffen. "I prefer unmarried, Your Grace, but I suppose accuracy has its place." Something flickered in the Duchess's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. "You didn't make your debut?" "No, Your Grace." "Why not?" "My mother died. Someone needed to raise the children." "Your father has money for governesses." "Governesses aren't mothers." "No," the Duchess agreed quietly. "They're not." She was silent for a moment, studying Arabella with an intensity that felt like being read. "You're not pretty like your sister." "No, Your Grace." Arabella kept her voice steady despite the sting. She knew what she looked like, handsome rather than beautiful, striking rather than soft, the kind of face that made people uncomfortable because they couldn't immediately categorize it. "You're something more interesting. You're memorable." The Duchess smiled, and it transformed her face entirely. "I find myself curious about you, Miss Sinclair. That happens rarely at my age. You will take tea with me tomorrow, alone." It wasn't a request. Arabella recognized commands when she heard them. "Of course, Your Grace." "Good." The Duchess rose, signaling the end of the audience. "Pemberton will show you where everything is. Dinner is at 8. My son may or may not join us. He keeps his own hours and his own counsel, and I've long since stopped trying to manage either." "Your son? Your Grace?" Louisa asked, curiosity overcoming caution. "The Marquis?" The Duchess's expression flickered again, something complicated moving beneath the surface. "Yes, Lord Thornbury. You'll meet him eventually, I'm sure. Try not to believe everything you've heard about him. Try also not to be alone with him in any room where the doors don't lock from the inside." She swept out, leaving the Sinclairs in stunned silence. "Well," Marcus said finally, "that was terrifying," Louisa whispered. "Interesting," Arabella corrected quietly. "She's interesting." What she didn't say, what she was thinking, was that the Duchess of Ashworth was also sad. There had been something in her voice when she mentioned her son, something wounded and weary that Arabella recognized from looking in mirrors. The look of a mother who had failed and knew it and couldn't figure out how to stop. That night, Arabella could not sleep. This was not unusual. She rarely slept well in strange beds, and the Ashworth townhouse was the strangest bed she'd ever encountered. But it was more than unfamiliarity keeping her awake. It was the silk sheets that felt too smooth, the mattress that was too soft, the silence that was too complete. At home, she could hear the house settling, the distant sounds of servants, the foxes calling in the garden. Here, there was nothing, just the thick walls of old money, insulating her from everything real. At midnight, she gave up the pretense of rest and went searching for something to read. The library was on the first floor. She'd noticed it during their tour, a cavernous room lined floor to ceiling with books that looked like they'd been collected over centuries. Surely no one would mind if she borrowed something dull enough to put her to sleep. A treatise on agriculture, perhaps, or a history of the Peloponnesian War. Anything but lying in that too-soft bed, thinking about all the ways she didn't belong here. She found the library easily enough. What she didn't expect to find was the man sprawled in a leather armchair by the cold fireplace, a bottle of brandy in one hand, and a look of such profound self-loathing on his face that she stopped dead in the doorway. He was, she realized, extremely handsome. Even dishevelled and clearly drunk, with his cravat untied and his dark hair falling across his forehead, he had the kind of face that belonged on a Roman coin, all sharp angles and strong bones, and a mouth that suggested either cruelty or passion, depending on how the light caught it. His eyes, when they found her, were the grey of winter storms. "You're not Pemberton," he said. His voice was rough, blurred at the edges. "Pemberton doesn't wear night-dresses." Arabella became suddenly, painfully aware of her state of undress. She'd thrown a shawl over her nightgown, thinking she wouldn't encounter anyone at this hour, but now she felt exposed in ways that had nothing to do with clothing. "I'm a guest," she said, keeping her voice cool. "I was looking for something to read." "A guest?" He laughed, but there was no humour in it. "Of course. The merchant and his brood. Mother's latest project." He took a long drink from the bottle, not bothering with a glass, she noticed. "Which one are you? The pretty one who's supposed to catch a husband, or the other one?" The words hit like a slap, but Arabella had been raised to hide her wounds. "The other one," she said flatly. "And you must be the Marquis of Thornbury, the rake who's supposed to have reformed but clearly hasn't." Something flickered in those grey eyes. Surprise, perhaps. He wasn't used to being spoken to this way. Good. You've heard of me." He raised the bottle in a mocking toast. "All terrible things, I hope. Enough to know I shouldn't be alone with you in any room where the doors don't lock from the inside." She was quoting his mother deliberately, watching for his reaction. "Your mother's words, not mine." The reaction was immediate and devastating. Something in his face crumpled, just for a moment, before the mask slammed back down. "My mother," he said, "is a wise woman. You should take her advice." "I generally take my own." Arabella moved further into the room, refusing to be intimidated. "I came for a book. I'm going to get one. Then I'm going to leave, and you can continue, whatever this is. Drowning yourself in self-pity, I assume." "Self-pity?" He laughed again, bitter as poison. "Is that what you think this is? I think you're a man who was handed everything and decided to set fire to it instead of appreciating it." She was being cruel now, and she knew it, but something about his easy assumption that she was the other one had cut deep. "I think you're bored and spoiled and using dissolution as a substitute for actual emotion. I think you don't know anything about me." He was on his feet now, swaying slightly, and she realized how tall he was, half a head taller than her at least, and broad in the shoulders despite his lean build. "You don't know what I've done, what I've lost, what I—" He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "Go get your book. Get out. I don't owe you my confessions." "I don't want them." Arabella turned to the nearest shelf. Scanning titles she couldn't really see because her heart was pounding too hard. She grabbed something at random she'd check what it was later and headed for the door. But something made her stop at the threshold, made her turn back to look at him. He'd collapsed back into the chair, the bottle dangling from his fingers, his head tipped back against the leather. He looked broken. Not just drunk or dissipated, but genuinely shattered, like something fundamental had cracked inside him, and he was just waiting for the pieces to fall. "You're wrong, you know," she said quietly. He didn't open his eyes. "About what?" "I'm not the other one. I'm the one who holds everything together while everyone else gets to fall apart." She paused, watching him. "What's your excuse?" His laugh was barely a sound. "I'm the one who let everything fall apart, while everyone else held on." She should go. She should absolutely go. He was drunk and dangerous, and everything she'd been warned about, and standing here in her nightdress having cryptic conversations with him was precisely the kind of behavior that ruined reputations. But she recognized something in him, something she saw in mirrors. "Get some sleep," she said finally. "Drink water before you pass out, or you'll regret it in the morning. And if you must continue this," she gestured at the bottle, "do it in your own rooms where the servants won't gossip." "Why do you care what the servants gossip about?" "I don't. But your mother does, and she seems like a woman with enough burdens already." She left before he could respond, but she felt his eyes on her all the way to the door. Grey eyes like winter storms, seeing straight through her in a way that made her feel more exposed than any state of undress. The book in her hands, she discovered when she reached her room, was a treatise on animal husbandry. Fitting, somehow. She read it until dawn, absorbing nothing, thinking about the broken man in the library who looked at her like she was something he couldn't quite categorize. The next weeks settled into a rhythm that Arabella found both exhausting and oddly comfortable. Mornings were spent with the Duchess, who had claimed Arabella as her personal project, with a determination that brooked no argument. They took tea together, discussed books, argued about politics. The Duchess held surprisingly radical views for a woman of her station, and generally behaved as though they were equals rather than noblewoman and merchant's daughter. The Duchess asked questions, pointed, personal questions that made Arabella uncomfortable, and listened to the answers with an attention that was almost overwhelming. "You're lonely," the Duchess said one morning, 3 weeks into their acquaintance. It was raining outside, a grey London drizzle that matched Arabella's mood. "You've been lonely for years, surrounded by people who need you and no one who sees you." Arabella's teacup rattled in its saucer. "Your Grace, don't Your Grace me when I'm right." The Duchess's eyes were kind, despite her sharp words. "I recognize it because I've felt it. The particular isolation of being essential. Everyone depends on you, but no one thinks to ask how you're doing. They assume you're fine because you're always fine. Being fine is your purpose. I am fine. You're surviving." "It's not the same thing." The Duchess reached across to touch Arabella's hand briefly. "I had a daughter once. She would have been about your age now." The past tense hung in the air like smoke. Arabella didn't ask. "She died when she was 7. Scarlet fever. And Sebastian, my son, was 12, and he watched me fall apart, and he decided that someone had to hold things together." The Duchess's voice was steady, but her eyes were not. "He's been trying to hold things together ever since. Until 3 years ago, when he decided he couldn't anymore." "What happened 3 years ago?" "His father's sins caught up with him." The Duchess smiled, but it was bitter. "That's all I'll say. The rest is Sebastian's story to tell, if he chooses. I only mention it because you look at him like you're trying to solve a puzzle. And I want you to know he's not a puzzle. He's a person, a broken one, but a person nonetheless." Arabella thought about the library, about grey eyes and bitter laughter, and the particular quality of pain that came from being the one who let everything fall apart. "I'm not trying to solve him," she said. "No," the Duchess agreed. "You're trying to dismiss him. That's worse." Afternoons belonged to Louisa. Arabella accompanied her sister to dress fittings and dance lessons, and interminable calls on various ladies who needed to see the Duchess's new protégée before deciding whether to acknowledge her existence. It was exhausting work, smiling and nodding, and pretending she didn't notice the subtle condescension, the barely hidden surprise that a merchant's daughter could speak proper English and use the correct fork. Louisa blossomed under the attention. Arabella wilted beneath it. But she did her duty. She always did her duty. The evenings were the hardest. Balls and dinners and musicales, all of them requiring her to stand at the edges while Louisa danced and flirted, and slowly, painstakingly, won society over through sheer charm and determination. Arabella watched her sister twirl in the arms of eligible lords and told herself she wasn't jealous. She was proud. She was happy. She was exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't touch. And through it all, Sebastian Ashworth watched her. She didn't understand it at first, kept thinking she was imagining his gaze, kept telling herself that the Marquis of Thornbury had better things to do than stare at a wallflower. But it kept happening. Across ballrooms, she would look up and find those grey eyes fixed on her. At dinners, she would feel the weight of his attention from the other end of the table. He never spoke to her, avoided her, in fact, with a determination that felt almost insulting, but he watched. Always watched. And stranger still, he seemed to be improving. Not reformed. Precisely, he still had a reputation for gambling and drink and inappropriate liaisons, but he appeared at more events than he had in years. Sober, dressed properly, dancing with wallflowers and elderly matrons instead of scandalous widows. Society noticed. Society whispered. "The Marquis seems changed," Lady Pemberton observed one evening, her tone suggesting she didn't believe it. "They say he hasn't been seen in any of his usual haunts for weeks." "Perhaps he's bored with vice," her companion suggested. "Or perhaps he's found a new one." Their eyes slid to Arabella, who was standing close enough to hear every word. She kept her expression placid with effort. Let them talk. Their gossip couldn't hurt her, but it could hurt Louisa, and that was what kept Arabella awake at night. If society decided that the Marquis of Thornbury had set his sights on the merchant's spinster daughter, Louisa's prospects could suffer by association. The ton was capricious that way, one whisper of scandal, one raised eyebrow from the wrong matron, and doors that had crept open would slam shut again. She needed to put a stop to whatever this was. She needed to confront Sebastian Ashworth and tell him to stop watching her, stop appearing at events where she would be, stop making her feel like she was visible for the first time in years. She needed to stop wanting him to keep doing it. Lady Pemberton's ball was the event of the season, a massive affair at her Mayfair mansion, with ice sculptures and imported champagne and more candles than Arabella had seen in her entire life. Louisa was in her element, dancing every dance, her card filled before the first notes of music played. Arabella watched from her usual post against the wall and tried to remember what it felt like to want things. Miss Sinclair. She turned. Sebastian Ashworth stood beside her, impeccable in his evening clothes, his expression unreadable. Lord Thornbury. She was proud of how steady her voice was. How unexpected. Is it? His lips quirked. You've been watching me all evening. You've been watching me for 3 weeks. I thought perhaps I should return the favour. He laughed, a real laugh. Not the bitter thing she'd heard in the library, and something in Arabella's chest turned over. Fair point. Dance with me. I don't think that's wise. I rarely do wise things. Dance with me anyway. People will talk. People are already talking. His voice softened. They'll talk whether you dance with me or not. At least this way, we'll have one dance to show for it. It was terrible logic. She knew it was terrible logic. But her feet were already moving, her hand already reaching for his, her body betraying her in ways she hadn't thought possible. And then they were on the dance floor, his hand warm against her waist, and she couldn't remember why she'd thought this was a bad idea. "Why do you keep watching me?" she asked, as they moved through the figures of the waltz. "I don't know." He sounded genuinely puzzled by his own behavior. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect? The other one?" He winced. "I deserved that. I was drunk and cruel, and I'm sorry." "You were, and I accept your apology." She studied his face as they turned. "You've been different lately. Sober. Present. People are noticing." "Are you noticing?" "I notice everything. It's my particular curse." His hand tightened on her waist just slightly. "What else have you noticed?" "That you're in pain. That you're hiding something. That you use dissolution as a shield to keep everyone at a distance. And now that you've stopped, you don't know who you are without it." She met his eyes. "Am I close?" For a long moment he didn't answer. The music swelled around them, carrying them through steps that felt more like flight than dance. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Too close. Much too close." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's refreshing. Everyone else sees what they want to see, the rake, the disappointment, the cautionary tale. You see," he trailed off, "I see a man who's trying to hold himself together while everyone else watches him fall apart." She smiled, but it was sad. "I understand that. More than you know." The dance ended. They stood frozen for a moment, hands still clasped, the air between them charged with something neither of them had words for. Then reality rushed back in the watching eyes, the whispered comments, the 1,000 small dangers of being visible, and Arabella stepped away. "Thank you for the dance, Lord Thornbury." "Sebastian." His voice was quiet, urgent. "My name is Sebastian." "I know." She turned to go. "But I shouldn't use it." She felt his eyes on her as she walked away, grey and searching and wanting. She didn't look back. She found Louisa missing an hour later. It happened gradually. The realization first, the awareness that she hadn't seen her sister in a while, then the quickening pulse of concern, then the full-blown panic when she searched every room and came up empty. Louisa's dance partner for the last set had been Lord Reginald Pemberton, the hostess's son, a charming young man with excellent tailoring and eyes that had always struck Arabella as slightly too calculating. The garden. He would have taken her to the garden. Arabella moved through the crowd as quickly as decorum allowed, then faster once she reached the terrace doors. The garden was vast and dark, lit only by scattered lanterns, and she had no idea which direction they'd gone. She picked one at random and started walking, her heart pounding in her throat. She found them near the rose arbour. Louisa pressed against the thorned lattice, Lord Pemberton's hands where they had no right to be, her sister's face pale with shock and fear. "Get your hands off her." Arabella's voice came out low and dangerous, nothing like her own. Pemberton turned, irritation flickering across his handsome features. "Ah, the chaperone. I was wondering when you'd appear." He didn't let go of Louisa. "We're having a private conversation, Miss Sinclair. Perhaps you could—" "I said let her go." "And if I don't?" He was smiling now, the smile of a man who knew he held all the cards. "She came willingly enough. Who's to say what happened out here? Your word against mine, and I'm a Pemberton." "You're— what, exactly? Merchant stock playing dress-up?" "I'm the woman who's about to scream," Arabella said flatly, "and bring every guest in that ballroom running, including your mother." His smile faltered, but he still didn't release Louisa. "You wouldn't dare. The scandal would be inconvenient for my family, yes, but it would destroy yours." She stepped closer, voice dropping. "Your mother's ball, your mother's garden, your mother's son, caught compromising an innocent girl. The Duke of Ashworth's guest, no less. Who do you think society will believe? And even if they believe you, even if they decide I'm lying, the whisper will follow you forever. Every debutante's mother will wonder. Every hostess will hesitate before inviting you. You'll spend the rest of your life explaining." It was a bluff, mostly a bluff. But it was delivered with enough conviction that Pemberton's hands dropped from Louisa's arms. He stepped back, adjusting his cravat with studied casualness. "The girl was willing," he said, "but have it your way. She's not worth the trouble." He strolled past Arabella toward the house, close enough that she could smell the wine on his breath, close enough that his whispered words reached her clearly. "Neither are you." Louisa collapsed into her arms, sobbing. Arabella held her sister and made soothing sounds, and felt the rage beneath her skin like a living thing. She'd handled it, but barely, and if she'd been even 5 minutes later— "Is she hurt?" The voice came from the shadows. Sebastian emerged into the lantern light, his face pale and set, his hands clenched at his sides. "You were following us," Arabella said. "I saw Pemberton lead her out. I know his reputation." He looked at Louisa, still crying in Arabella's arms. "Is she hurt?" "Frightened. Nothing happened. I got here in time." Nothing." His voice was dark with something that might have been rage or grief or both. "She'll remember this. She'll always wonder what might have happened." He stepped closer. "There's a servant's entrance near the conservatory. I can get her inside without anyone seeing. She can wash her face, collect herself. No one needs to know." "Why are you helping us?" "Because I should have been faster." He met her eyes. "Because you shouldn't have had to handle that alone. Because Pemberton is a predator, and everyone knows it, and everyone pretends otherwise. And I'm tired of pretending." They stared at each other in the darkness. Behind them, music drifted from the ballroom, the sound of dancing and laughter, and a world that had no idea what had almost happened in its carefully cultivated garden. "Thank you," Arabella said finally. Sebastian led them through the servants' entrance, guiding Louisa with surprising gentleness, while Arabella followed. He found them a small sitting room, summoned a maid for water and cloths, and stood guard at the door while Louisa cleaned her face and Arabella helped her repair her hair. Through it all, he said nothing. Just waited. Just watched. When Louisa was finally presentable, still shaken but no longer visibly so, Sebastian escorted them back to the ballroom through a side entrance that avoided the main crush. No one noticed their return. No one had noticed their absence. Society continued its glittering dance, oblivious. "I'll handle Pemberton," Sebastian said quietly, before they separated. "He won't bother your sister again." "How?" "By reminding him what happens to men who cross the Ashworth family. My reputation has its uses." His smile was thin and sharp. "Let me be the monster for once in service of something good." He walked away before she could respond. Arabella watched him go, this complicated man who was nothing like she'd expected, and felt something shift in her chest that she couldn't name. She found him later on the terrace. The ball was winding down, the guests departing in carriages that clattered over cobblestones, and Arabella should have been shepherding Louisa home. But Louisa was with their father, already in the Ashworth coach, and Arabella had told them she needed air. It was almost true. Sebastian was leaning against the balustrade, staring out at the garden where everything had almost gone wrong. He didn't turn when she approached, but she saw his shoulders tense. "You should go," he said. "Probably." She moved to stand beside him. "I wanted to thank you. Properly." "You already did." "Not properly." She turned to face him, and he finally met her eyes. "You could have stayed inside. You could have let it become someone else's problem. Most men would have." "I'm not most men." "No, you're not." She hesitated, then pressed on. "You shouldn't look at me the way you do." "What way?" "Like I might be worth something." He laughed, soft and broken. "That's my line." "Is it?" "I said it to myself. The night we met, in the library." He turned to face her fully, and the moonlight caught his features in silver and shadow. "I told myself not to look at you like you might save me, like you might be the thing that makes sense when nothing else does. I'm not anyone's salvation, Sebastian. I can barely save myself. And yet you saved your sister tonight, without hesitation, without thinking about the cost." He reached out, and his fingers brushed her cheek just a touch, barely there, but it burned like fire. "You see yourself as practical, useful, the one who holds things together while everyone else falls apart. But that's not what I see." "What do you see?" "Someone extraordinary. Someone who's been invisible for so long she's forgotten she deserves to be seen." His hand dropped. "Someone I have no right to want as badly as I want you." The words hung in the air between them, as dangerous as they were honest. Arabella knew she should step back, should end this conversation before it went somewhere neither of them could come back from, should remember who she was and who he was, and all the thousand reasons this was impossible. "Sebastian." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't polished or practiced or any of the things she might have expected from a man of his reputation. It was desperate, searching, a little broken, his hands cupping her face like she was something precious, his mouth on hers like he was drowning and she was air. She should have pulled away. She should have slapped him, screamed, done any of the things a proper young woman was supposed to do when a notorious rake kissed her on a moonlit terrace. Instead, she kissed him back. For one perfect moment, there was nothing but this, his lips on hers, his hands in her hair. The taste of champagne and desperation and something that might have been hope. She felt herself coming undone, all the careful walls she'd built crumbling under the weight of being wanted, being seen, being chosen. Then reality crashed back in. The sounds of the last departing carriages, the knowledge of who they were and what they risked, the certainty that this could only end in disaster. Sebastian pulled away first, breathing hard. His eyes were wild. "I'm sorry," he said roughly. "I shouldn't have. I'm sorry." "Don't be. You don't understand." He stepped back, putting distance between them. I can't. There are things you don't know about me, about my family, about what I've done. Then tell me." "I can't." His voice cracked. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. Just go home, Arabella. Go home and forget this happened." "Forget me?" "I don't think I can." "You have to." He was already retreating toward the doors, his face anguished. "For both our sakes, you have to." He disappeared inside, leaving her alone on the terrace with the taste of him still on her lips and the echo of his words still ringing in her ears. She should have gone after him. She should have demanded answers, forced a confrontation, done something other than stand there like a fool. Instead, she touched her mouth where his had been and wondered how a single kiss could rearrange the entire geography of her heart. Above her, the moon hung heavy and full, casting silver light over the garden where her sister had almost been ruined, and the terrace where Arabella herself had been undone. Somewhere inside, a clock struck 3. Somewhere inside, Sebastian was retreating into whatever shadows he called home, and Arabella stood frozen between want and wisdom, knowing that nothing would ever be the same. 3 days passed in which Sebastian Ashworth did not appear at breakfast, did not join the family for dinner, and did not materialize at any of the social engagements where Arabella had grown accustomed to feeling his gaze across crowded rooms. His absence was conspicuous in ways his presence had never been a hole in the fabric of her days that she refused to acknowledge, but couldn't stop noticing. "Sebastian has taken himself off to the country," the Duchess mentioned casually over their morning tea, watching Arabella's face with eyes that saw far too much. "Estate business," he claims. "Though what estate business requires attending at 3 in the morning with a packed valise is beyond my understanding. I'm sure Lord Thornbury has his reasons." Arabella kept her voice carefully neutral, her hands steady on her teacup. "It's not my concern." "Isn't it?" "No, Your Grace, it isn't." The Duchess hummed thoughtfully, but didn't press further. They spoke of other things: Louisa's growing success in society, the upcoming Ashworth ball that the Duchess was planning, the weather, but the conversation felt hollow, stripped of something essential. Arabella found herself distracted, her attention drifting to windows as though she might spot Sebastian's carriage returning. Foolish. Utterly foolish. She was a practical woman, not some romantic heroine pining for a man who had kissed her senseless and then fled. He had told her to forget him. She should respect that wish. She should not lie awake at night remembering the taste of champagne on his lips. "You're not eating," the Duchess observed. "You've been not eating for 3 days. If you're determined to waste away from longing, I'd prefer you do it somewhere I don't have to watch." "I'm not—" Arabella stopped, recognizing the trap. "I have no idea what you mean." "Of course you don't." The Duchess set down her teacup with a decisive click. "My son is an idiot. This is not news to anyone who has known him for more than 5 minutes. He runs from anything that might require him to feel something genuine, and he has been running for 3 years. The fact that he ran from you specifically suggests that you matter more than he knows how to handle. With respect, Your Grace, you're making assumptions. I'm making observations. There is a difference." The Duchess rose, smoothing her skirts. "He'll be back within the week. He always comes back. And when he does, I expect you to stop pretending you don't care what happens to him. It's exhausting to watch, and I'm too old for exhaustion." She swept out, leaving Arabella alone with cold tea and the uncomfortable suspicion that she was not as mysterious as she liked to believe. Sebastian returned 5 days later, just as his mother had predicted. Arabella learned of his return not through any direct communication, but through the household's subtle shift in energy servants moving with slightly more purpose. The Duchess's expression settling into something that was either satisfaction or resignation, the sound of boots in hallways that had been too quiet. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself she wouldn't seek him out, wouldn't ask where he'd been, wouldn't give him the satisfaction of knowing his absence had affected her. She lasted until 11 o'clock that night, when sleeplessness drove her once again to the library, and she found him exactly where she'd found him that first night, sprawled in the leather armchair, a bottle in his hand, his face illuminated by dying firelight. But the bottle, she noticed, was full, unopened. He was holding it like a talisman rather than a tool, staring at the amber liquid as though it held answers he wasn't sure he wanted. "You're back," she said from the doorway. He didn't startle, didn't even look up. "I'm back. Your mother said estate business. My mother is kind." He finally raised his eyes, and she saw exhaustion there, bone-deep weariness that made him look older than his years. "I was running away. From you. From everything you make me feel." "And did it work? What do you think?" His laugh was bitter. "I got as far as Thornbury Manor before I realized I'd brought you with me. In my head. Couldn't stop thinking about you, no matter how many ledgers I buried myself in. Couldn't stop remembering." He broke off, jaw tightening. "I shouldn't have kissed you." "You said that already, on the terrace, right before you disappeared. I'm saying it again." "Why?" She stepped into the room, pulling her shawl tighter against the chill. "Because you didn't mean it? Or because you meant it too much?" For a long moment he didn't answer. The fire crackled. Somewhere in the house a clock chimed the quarter hour. Arabella waited, watching the struggle play out across his features, the war between what he wanted to say and what he thought he should. "There are things you don't know about me," he said finally. "Things I should have told you before the terrace, before any of it." "Then tell me now." "It's not that simple. It never is." She moved to the chair across from his, settling into it with a deliberate casualness she didn't feel. "I'm not going anywhere, Sebastian. I'm not going to run away because you reveal something shocking. I've spent my entire adult life managing crises. Whatever you're hiding, I can handle it." "You shouldn't have to handle it. That's the point." He set the unopened bottle on the side table with a heavy thunk. "You should be free to live your life without being dragged into my wreckage." "What if I want to be dragged?" The words came out before she could stop them, honest in a way she hadn't intended. Sebastian's eyes snapped to hers, something fierce and hungry flickering in their depths. "Don't," he said hoarsely. "Don't say things like that. Not when I'm trying to be noble for once in my miserable life." "I don't need you to be noble. I need you to be honest." The silence stretched between them, thick with everything unspoken. Arabella watched Sebastian struggle with himself, watched the walls he'd built threaten to crumble, watched him make a decision that changed the shape of both their futures. "My father," he said slowly, "was a gambler." "I know. Your mother mentioned, not the way you're thinking." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, face half-shadowed. "When my father was alive, everyone believed the Ashworth fortune was unassailable. Ancient money, sound investments, properties across 3 counties. What no one knew, what even my mother didn't know until after he died, was that he had mortgaged nearly everything, sold assets, borrowed against the rest, all to feed a gambling addiction that consumed him." Arabella felt something cold settle in her stomach. "How bad?" "When he died 3 years ago, I inherited a title, a crumbling estate, and debts that would take 3 lifetimes to repay." Sebastian's voice was flat, stripped of emotion. "The London townhouse is still ours, Mother's marriage settlement protected it. But everything else, I've spent 3 years selling off land, letting staff go, maintaining the appearance of wealth while slowly drowning in debt. That's why you... She trailed off, understanding dawning. The drinking, the scandals, the reputation. Easier to be known as a dissolute rake than a bankrupt marquis. His smile was razor-thin. Society forgives moral failings far more readily than financial ones. As long as I was too drunk and debauched to be taken seriously, no one looked too closely at the account books. Your mother knows? She's been using her own funds to slow the bleeding. Her settlement, her inheritance from her family. I've been trying to stop her, but she's... He shook his head. Stubborn, like someone else I could mention. Arabella ignored the pointed observation. Her mind was racing, cataloguing implications, seeing the shape of his story in ways he probably hadn't intended. How much do you owe? £30,000, give or take. She exhaled slowly. It was a staggering sum, enough to buy a small estate, enough to live comfortably for decades. But not, she realized with a practical clarity that surprised her, insurmountable. What's your annual income from what remains? Perhaps 2,000, if the harvests are good. And your mother's contribution? Another 3,000, which I refuse to accept, but she gives it anyway. So 5,000 total, against 30,000 in debt. Arabella nodded slowly. That's not impossible. Difficult, but not impossible. If you reduced expenditures, invested wisely, negotiated with your creditors for extended terms. You sound like a merchant. I am a merchant's daughter. She met his eyes steadily. My father started with nothing. Less than nothing. He was in debt when he opened his first shop. I grew up watching him turn pennies into pounds through careful planning and strategic risk. This is what I know, Sebastian. This is what I'm good at. I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. She leaned forward, matching his posture. Show me the accounts. Let me see what you're working with. I can't promise miracles, but I can promise a fresh perspective. Sometimes that's all a situation needs. Sebastian stared at her, as though she'd grown a second head. You want to review my financial records? Yes. That's the least romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Good. I'm not trying to be romantic. I'm trying to be useful. She paused, something softening in her expression. It's what I do, what I've always done, but this time I'm choosing to do it. For you, because I want to. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. Why? After everything, the kiss, my running away, all of it, why would you want to help me? Because you helped Louisa. Arabella held his gaze. Because you saw something wrong and you acted, without thought for yourself. Because beneath all the dissipation and scandal, there's someone worth saving. And because... She hesitated, then pressed on. Because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you either, whether I wanted to or not. Sebastian reached across the space between them and took her hand. His grip was warm, slightly rough, steadier than she'd expected from a man who'd spent 3 years trying to drown himself in drink. Tomorrow, he said quietly. I'll show you everything tomorrow. Tonight, I just want to sit here with you and pretend, for a little while, that we're two ordinary people with ordinary problems. There's nothing ordinary about either of us. No. He smiled, and for the first time since she'd known him, it reached his eyes. There isn't. The accounts were worse than Sebastian had admitted, and better than Arabella had feared. They spread the ledgers across the library table the next afternoon, ostensibly working on estate correspondence, should anyone inquire. The Duchess, who almost certainly knew exactly what they were doing, made herself conspicuously absent. Louisa was at a fitting. Mr. Sinclair was in meetings. For a few precious hours, they had privacy and purpose. "You've been selling off the tenant farms," Arabella observed, running her finger down a column of figures. "That explains the reduced income." "Desperate times." Sebastian's voice was flat with old shame. "Each sale bought me another 6 months." "But the core estate remains?" "Thornbury Manor, and about 500 acres, some woodland, a stretch of river that's excellent for fishing, should I ever want to invite guests I cannot afford to feed." Arabella made a note in the margin. "What about investments? Your father must have had something in the funds." "Liquidated. All of it. He needed ready cash for the tables." "And your mother's settlements, she brought property to the marriage?" "A house in Bath, some land in Hampshire, all in her name, protected from creditors." Sebastian's jaw tightened. "She's been drawing on those to help. I've tried to stop her, but she refuses to watch her son drown. Yes, I'm familiar with the type." Arabella set down her pencil. "Here's what I see. You've been operating from a position of panic for 3 years, making short-term decisions that ease immediate pressure but worsen the long-term outlook. Every property you sell reduces your income potential. Every month you maintain appearances beyond your means adds to the debt. I'm aware. I'm not criticizing. I'm analyzing." She pulled a fresh sheet of paper toward her. "What you need is a 5-year plan, maybe 10. Something that stabilizes your position and creates a path forward." "What I need," Sebastian said dryly, "is an heiress willing to overlook my debts in exchange for my title." The words hung in the air between them. Arabella felt something cold slide through her chest. "Is that your plan?" "Marriage? It's the obvious solution." He wouldn't meet her eyes. "A wealthy bride could solve everything. Pay off the creditors, restore the estate, save my mother from bankrupting herself. All it would cost is my pride." "And your happiness?" "I haven't been happy in 3 years. What difference would it make?" Arabella set down her pencil with careful precision. "You're right. It is the obvious solution. There are dozens of wealthy families who would trade a fortune for a title, my own father among them, if Louisa weren't determined to marry for love. You could have your pick of heiresses by the end of the season. You think I should do it? I think it's not my decision to make." She met his eyes squarely. "But if you're asking my opinion, no. I don't think you should marry for money. Not because it's wrong, but because it wouldn't work. Not for you." "Why not?" "Because you're already destroying yourself with guilt over your father's sins. How much worse would it be if you added a wife you didn't love? A family you'd trapped in a marriage of convenience? You'd end up right back where you started, drinking yourself to death to escape the shame of your own existence." Sebastian was silent. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "You see too clearly. It's my particular curse, remember? I remember everything you've ever said to me." He reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "I remember everything about you. The way you looked in the library that first night, fierce and frightened and utterly magnificent. The way you stood up to Pemberton in the garden. The way you kissed me on the terrace like you'd been waiting your whole life for someone to see you." "Sebastian, I'm not going to marry an heiress." His grip tightened. "I may be a fool and a failure, but I'm not that much of a coward. If I marry when I marry, it will be because I can't imagine my life without that person, not because I need her money." Arabella's heart was pounding. "And what about your debts?" "We'll figure it out, you and I, together." He smiled, and there was something new in it, hope, fragile and tentative. "If you're willing, if you want—" "Yes." The word came out before she could second-guess it. Sebastian's eyes widened. "Yes? Yes. I want to help you. Yes, I'll stay. Yes, too. She broke off, suddenly aware of how much she was revealing. Yes, to whatever this is. I don't know what to call it. But yes. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. It was barely a touch chaste, really, compared to the terrace, but it felt like a promise. Then we'll figure it out, he said. Together. The weeks that followed were the strangest and most exhilarating of Arabella's life. On the surface, nothing had changed. She still chaperoned Louisa to endless social engagements, still took tea with the Duchess, still managed correspondence and household details, and all the mundane tasks that constituted her existence. But beneath the surface, everything was different. She and Sebastian met in the library every afternoon, poring over accounts and investment possibilities, while pretending to anyone who asked that they were helping the Duchess with correspondence. They developed to plan conservative investments in textile manufacturing, her father's expertise, freely shared when she'd explained the situation in vague terms, careful negotiation with creditors for extended repayment schedules, stringent economization in household expenses. Progress was slow but measurable. For the first time in 3 years, Sebastian could see a future that didn't end in ruin. And somewhere in the midst of all that practical planning, they fell in love. It happened gradually, through small moments and stolen glances and conversations that ranged from finances to philosophy to their darkest fears. Sebastian told her about his childhood, the pressure of being the heir, the shadow of his father's illness, for gambling was an illness, he'd come to believe, as surely as consumption or fever. The loss of his sister when he was 12, and the mother who never quite recovered. Arabella told him about hers, the endless competence expected of her, the siblings she'd raised, the life she'd sacrificed, without ever being asked if she wanted to. "You resent them," Sebastian observed one evening, as they walked in the garden after dinner. Louisa was at a musicale. The Duchess had retired early. They had perhaps an hour of unsupervised time. "Who?" "Your family. You resent them for needing you." Arabella was quiet for a long moment. It was the kind of observation that, from anyone else, would have felt like an accusation. From Sebastian, it felt like understanding. "Sometimes," she admitted finally, "I love them. I would do anything for them. But sometimes I wonder what my life would have been if I'd been allowed to have one. A season of my own, a chance to be young and foolish and impractical." She laughed softly. "I've been practical my whole life. I don't know how to be anything else." "You're impractical with me. That's different." "Is it?" He stopped walking, turning to face her. The garden was dark around them, full of the scent of roses and the distant sound of the city. Falling for a penniless marquis with a scandal-ridden reputation and £30,000 of debt, that's the very definition of impractical. "I never said I was falling for you. You didn't have to." He touched her face, fingertips light against her cheek. "I see you, remember? Just as you see me." She should have denied it. Should have protected herself with practical objections and sensible hesitations. Instead, she leaned into his touch and let herself feel something she'd been denying for weeks. "If I am falling," she said quietly, "what do we do about it?" "I don't know." His honesty was devastating. "I have nothing to offer you. No fortune, no security, no guarantee of anything except my own stubborn devotion. Any sensible woman would run the other direction." "I've never been sensible where you're concerned." "No." He smiled, and her heart stuttered. "You've been extraordinary." He kissed her then, and it was different from the terrace, slower, deeper, less desperate, but somehow more devastating. She felt herself opening to him in ways she hadn't known she was closed, all her careful walls crumbling under the gentle assault of his tenderness. When they finally broke apart, she was trembling. "We should go inside," she managed. "We should." Neither of them moved. "Sebastian, I know." He rested his forehead against hers, breathing unsteady. "I know we can't. Not yet. Not until—" He pulled back, visibly collecting himself. "There are things I need to sort out first. The debts. My reputation. I won't offer you a future I can't deliver. I don't need promises. But I need to make them." His eyes were fierce. "You deserve someone who can stand before God and society and declare his intentions without shame. I want to be that man. I'm trying to become that man. Will you wait? Just a little longer?" "Yes," she said, because she was beginning to understand that yes was the only answer she had for him. "I'll wait." Mr. Harold Hartwell arrived in London the following week. He was a widower of 42, respectable and wealthy, with a shipping fortune and 2 young children who needed a mother. The Duchess introduced him to the Sinclair family at a dinner party, and by the end of the evening, Arabella could see the calculation in her father's eyes. "He asked about you specifically," Marcus Sinclair said that night as they reviewed the evening's events. "Wanted to know if you were spoken for." "I'm not out in society, Father. I can't be spoken for." "You could be, if the right person spoke." He studied her with the shrewdness that had built his empire. "Mr. Hartwell is a good man, wealthy, stable, looking for exactly the kind of wife you would be sensible, capable, good with children. Father, I'm not pushing you, but I want you to consider it." His voice softened. "You've given so much for this family, Bella. You deserve security, comfort, a home of your own." "I have a home." "You have responsibilities. It's not the same thing." He patted her hand. "Just think about it. That's all I ask." She thought about it. She thought about it constantly, not because she wanted to, but because Mr. Hartwell made it impossible to forget. He appeared at every event she attended. He sent flowers to the house. He engaged her in conversations about shipping logistics and household management and his children's educations, all with an earnestness that was almost endearing. He was, she had to admit, exactly what a sensible woman should want, and she felt nothing for him except a vague, guilty irritation. "The shipping magnate is persistent," Sebastian observed one afternoon, his voice carefully neutral. They were in the library, ostensibly working on estate correspondence, but neither of them had touched a document in 20 minutes. "He's being courted, not me, by my father. The alliance would be advantageous for the business. And what do you want?" "You know what I want." She met his eyes. "But what I want, and what I should want, are different things. Mr. Hartwell offers security, stability, a reasonable life." "You sound like you're trying to convince yourself." "Maybe I am." She stood abruptly, moving to the window. Outside, London carried on its business carriages and pedestrians, and all the ordinary machinery of life. "My father raised me to be practical, to make sensible choices, and the sensible choice is obvious." "Then make it." She turned. Sebastian was watching her with an expression she couldn't read: pain and resignation, and something that looked terribly like surrender. "What?" "If Hartwell is the sensible choice, make it. I told you I had nothing to offer. I meant it." His voice was flat. "I won't stand in the way of your happiness." "You think I would be happy with him?" "I think you would be comfortable, safe. Those aren't nothing. They're not everything either." She moved back toward him, frustrated and frightened and suddenly desperately angry. "Do you want me to accept him? Is that what you're saying?" "I want—" He broke off, hands clenching. "I want you to have the life you deserve, and I can't give it to you. Not yet. Maybe not ever." That's not your decision to make. Isn't it? He rose, putting distance between them. You talk about what you want, but you never consider what you need. You need stability, Arabella. You need someone who can take care of you for once, instead of the other way around. You need... Don't tell me what I need. Her voice was sharp enough to cut. I have spent my entire life being told what I need to be practical, to be sensible, to be useful. No one has ever asked what I want. I'm asking now. Then listen. She closed the distance between them, grabbing his lapels with both hands. I want you. I want your debts and your scandal and your £30,000 of obligations. I want your broken pieces and your stubborn pride and your irritating habit of deciding what's best for me without consulting me. I want to build something with you, something real and difficult and ours. I don't want safe. I don't want comfortable. I want... He kissed her, hard. His hands tangled in her hair, scattering pins. Her back hit the bookshelf, volumes tumbling around them. It was nothing like the tender moment in the garden. This was desperation, hunger, all the wanting they'd been suppressing finally breaking free. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing raggedly. Sebastian's eyes were wild. If anyone had walked in, no one did. But if they had, then we would have had to get married. She laughed, slightly hysterical. What a tragedy that would be. Arabella. His voice was serious despite everything. I meant what I said. I won't offer you less than you deserve. I need time to... Take your time. She straightened her dress, began the impossible task of repairing her hair. But don't push me toward Hartwell while you're taking it. I can be patient, Sebastian. I cannot be redirected. I'm beginning to understand that. Good. She found a hairpin and stabbed it into her bun with more force than necessary. Now help me find the rest of these pins before someone comes looking for us. The Ashworth ball was the Duchess's triumph. 300 guests filled the townhouse's ballrooms, every notable family in London, all gathered to see and be seen under the glittering chandeliers. Louisa was the acknowledged belle of the evening, dancing every dance, her card filled 3 times over. She had attracted 3 serious suitors over the course of the season, and any of them would be acceptable to the family. She was, against all odds, a success. Arabella watched from her usual position against the wall and felt something she hadn't expected. Contentment. It wasn't happiness. Exactly, she was still too tangled in uncertainty for that. Sebastian had been keeping his distance since their encounter in the library, afraid of scandal, afraid of compromising her further. Mr. Hartwell was still pursuing her with patient determination. Her father was still dropping hints about sensible marriages and secure futures. Nothing was resolved. But Louisa was flourishing. Thomas and Edward were thriving. The Duchess had become something like a friend. And Sebastian, frustrating, complicated, beloved Sebastian, was somewhere in this ballroom, and he was hers, even if no one knew it yet. Miss Sinclair. She turned to find Mr. Hartwell at her elbow, earnest and hopeful in his impeccable evening clothes. Mr. Hartwell, you look lovely this evening. Thank you. Your children are well? They are. Thank you for asking. He hesitated, then pressed on. I had hoped, that is. I wondered if I might speak with you privately. There's something I should like to discuss. Arabella felt her stomach drop. She knew what was coming. Everyone in the room probably knew what was coming. Mr. Hartwell had been building toward this moment for weeks. Of course, she heard herself say. Perhaps the terrace? They walked out together, every eye in the room following them. Arabella saw her father's hopeful expression, saw the Duchess's unreadable one, saw Sebastian. Standing by the doors to the card-room, his face white as marble, watching her walk away with another man. She wanted to go to him, wanted to explain that she wasn't accepting anything, wasn't choosing anything, was only being polite because she didn't know how to be otherwise. But the crowd was between them, and Mr. Hartwell's hand was on her elbow, and the terrace doors were already opening. The night air was cool against her heated skin. Arabella moved to the balustrade, gripping it for support. "Miss Sinclair." Mr. Hartwell had followed her, his expression serious. "I realize this may be sudden, but I must speak plainly. My admiration for you has grown considerably over these past weeks. You are everything I hoped to find in a wife: sensible, capable, kind. My children would benefit enormously from your guidance, and I—" He took a breath. "I believe I could make you happy." "Mr. Hartwell, please, let me finish." He moved closer. "I know I am not a young man. I know I come with obligations, my children, my business. But I can offer you security, a good home, freedom from worry, and in time, perhaps, affection might grow between us. That is a very generous offer. Is it one you would consider?" Arabella looked at him, really looked. He was kind. He was stable. He was everything her practical mind had been trained to value. Behind her, through the glass doors, she could see the glittering ballroom, the dancers, the 1,000 small negotiations that constituted society's marriage market. She could also see Sebastian, still standing by the card-room doors, watching them with an expression of devastated resignation. "Mr. Hartwell," she said carefully, "I am deeply honored by your regard. But I cannot accept. Not because your offer isn't worthy, but because my affections are engaged elsewhere." His face fell, but he recovered quickly. "The Marquis? Is it so obvious? To someone who's been watching you?" "Yes." He smiled, rueful but not bitter. "I suspected as much. I hoped I was wrong." He took her hand and raised it briefly to his lips. "Lord Thornbury is fortunate, whether he knows it or not." "He knows nothing. No one does. It's complicated. Yes, I gathered." He released her hand. "I wish you every happiness, Miss Sinclair. Truly." "Thank you, Mr. Hartwell." He walked back inside, leaving her alone on the terrace. Arabella gripped the balustrade and tried to slow her racing heart. She'd done it. She'd refused a perfectly good offer for the sake of a man who couldn't even propose yet. It was the most impractical thing she'd ever done. It was also, she realized, the most honest. The terrace door opened behind her. She didn't turn, knowing somehow that it would be him. "He seemed disappointed," Sebastian said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "He was gracious about it." "You refused him?" "Obviously." "Why?" She finally turned to look at him. "Don't fish for compliments, Sebastian. It's beneath you." "I'm not—" He broke off, something cracking in his composure. "Arabella, the whole ballroom saw you walk out here with him. Everyone assumed you assumed I would accept a man I don't love because it was the sensible choice." "Yes." "Then you don't know me as well as you think." She faced him fully. "I told you once that I wanted you. I meant it. All of you. Debts and scandal and impossible complications. Did you think I would change my mind just because someone easier came along? I thought you would make the practical choice. It's what you do. It's what I was trained to do. It's not who I am." She reached up and touched his face, and he caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek. "I'm choosing you, Sebastian, whether you're ready for me or not." "I'm not ready." His voice was rough. "The debts aren't paid. My reputation isn't restored. I have nothing to offer you except yourself, except everything we could build together." She smiled. "That's enough. It's more than enough. Your father will never approve. A penniless marquis with £30,000 of debt. My father will come around. He always does when he sees I'm determined. And if he doesn't, then I'll manage, as I've always managed. She stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him through his evening clothes. I'm tired of waiting, Sebastian. I'm tired of pretending we're not already bound to each other. If you're not ready to propose, then tell me, and I'll wait longer. But don't push me away because you think I deserve better. I'm capable of deciding what I deserve. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. This woman who had stormed into his library in her nightdress and demanded he stop feeling sorry for himself, who had reviewed his accounts and reorganized his finances and kissed him senseless against a bookshelf. This practical, impossible, magnificent woman who saw him clearly and chose him anyway. "I love you," he said. It came out raw and unpolished, nothing like the flowery declarations of romantic novels. But Arabella felt the words pierce straight through her. "I know," she smiled. "I love you too, even when you're being an idiot. I'm often an idiot. I'm aware. I'm prepared to manage that aspect of our relationship as well." He laughed a real laugh, free and astonished, and pulled her into his arms. They stood there on the terrace, wrapped in each other, the ballroom glittering behind them, and their future stretching uncertain but possible ahead. "We should go back inside," she murmured against his shoulder. "We should. People will talk. Let them." He pulled back just enough to look at her. "I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending I don't feel what I feel. Tomorrow, I'm going to call on your father and ask for permission to court you properly. He'll say no. Then I'll ask again, and again, as many times as it takes." His eyes were fierce. "I told you I wanted to be someone who could declare his intentions without shame. I'm not there yet, but I'm close. Close enough to start. Sebastian, trust me, please. I know I've given you reasons to doubt, but I trust you." She silenced him with a kiss, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I've trusted you since the library, since the garden with Louisa, since the first moment you looked at me like I was worth seeing." "You are worth seeing." He pressed his forehead to hers. "You're worth everything." Behind them, the ballroom continued its glittering dance, oblivious to the two figures on the terrace who had just decided to build a future together. The music swelled, the candles flickered, the ton gossiped and flirted and jockeyed for position. And on the terrace, Arabella Sinclair and Sebastian Ashworth held each other and began to believe in impossible things. The moment was shattered by a shout from inside. They broke apart, startled, as the terrace doors flew open and Lord Reginald Pemberton strode through them. His face was flushed with wine and fury, his eyes fixed on Sebastian with undisguised hatred. "There you are!" Pemberton's voice carried across the terrace, loud enough that heads inside were turning. "Hiding out here with your merchant's daughter while decent people carry on." "Pemberton," Sebastian's voice was ice, "I suggest you return to the ballroom before you embarrass yourself further." "Embarrass myself?" Pemberton laughed, ugly and sharp. "That's rich, coming from the man who threatened me over some shopkeeper's brat." Arabella felt Sebastian go rigid beside her. "Careful." "Why? Afraid of the truth?" Pemberton stepped closer, swaying slightly. "Everyone knows about your little arrangement. The merchant spinster, warming the Marquis's bed in exchange for a chance at a title. It's the talk of the season. You're drunk and delusional. Am I? Then explain why she's out here with you, alone, after refusing Hartwell in front of the entire ballroom." Pemberton's gaze slid to Arabella with undisguised contempt. "Holding out for the higher prize, are we? The Marquis of Thornbury, with his debts and his scandals and his— That's enough!" Sebastian stepped forward, every line of his body coiled with barely restrained violence. "Apologize to Miss Sinclair and walk away. Now. Or what? You'll call me out?" Pemberton sneered. Over a merchant's daughter? The Ton will laugh you out of London. I'll take that risk. The terrace had filled with observers, now society's most avid gossips, drawn by the scent of scandal. Through the crowd, Arabella could see her father's shocked face, Louisa's frightened one, the Duchess pushing her way forward with grim determination, and she made a choice. "Lord Pemberton," she said clearly, loud enough for every straining ear to hear, "is mistaken about one thing." Pemberton turned to her with mocking attention. "Oh? Do enlighten us." "Lord Thornbury hasn't seduced me." She stepped forward, positioning herself between the two men, and spoke the words that would change everything. "I've seduced him." The silence that followed was absolute. Then the chaos began. The ballroom erupted. Arabella heard gasps, whispers, one sharp shriek that sounded like Lady Pemberton discovering her worst nightmare made flesh. She saw faces turning toward her, shock, delight, horror, fascination, the Tone's appetite for scandal finally satisfied in spectacular fashion. She saw her father pushing through the crowd, his face ashen. She saw Louisa clutching the arm of her nearest suitor, eyes wide with terrified confusion, and she saw Sebastian grab her hand and pull her toward the terrace doors, away from Pemberton's sputtering outrage, away from the chaos she had unleashed. "What have you done?" His voice was rough as he dragged her through the crowd, which parted before them like the Red Sea before Moses, though with considerably more whispering. "Arabella, what have you done? What needed to be done?" She was shaking, she realized distantly, her whole body trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline and the dawning comprehension of her own actions. "He was going to destroy you. The things he was saying. So you destroyed yourself instead." Sebastian pulled her into a small parlour off the main hallway, slamming the door behind them. His face was white, his eyes wild. "Do you understand what you've just announced to 300 of London's most influential gossips? You've ruined yourself, completely, irreparably." "I know. Your sister's prospects will survive. Louisa has the Duchess's patronage and 3 serious suitors who won't abandon her over my scandal." Arabella's voice was steadier than she felt. "I calculated the risks. Calculated the—" Sebastian broke off, running both hands through his hair until it stood on end. "This isn't a ledger, Arabella. This is your life, your reputation. Everything I what? Everything I was saving for some mythical future that was never going to arrive?" She stepped toward him, forcing him to meet her eyes. "I've spent 23 years being practical, being sensible. Being the one who holds everything together while everyone else gets to make mistakes and be forgiven for them. For once in my life, I chose to be reckless. For you. I didn't ask you to. No, you didn't. You were going to let Pemberton tear you apart in front of everyone rather than fight back, because you've convinced yourself you deserve to be punished." Her voice cracked. "Well, I don't agree. And I refuse to stand by while someone I love is destroyed by a vindictive coward with a grudge." Sebastian's expression shifted, anguish giving way to something rawer, more vulnerable. "You shouldn't have to protect me. That's not your decision to make." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers trembling against his cheek. "I chose this, Sebastian. Eyes open, consequences accepted. The only question now is what we do about it." Before he could answer, the parlour door flew open. The Duchess of Ashworth swept in like a ship in full sail, her grey silk gown rustling with purpose. Behind her came Marcus Sinclair, his face a thundercloud of competing emotions, and somewhat surprisingly Lord Hartwell, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Well," the Duchess said, surveying the scene with sharp eyes, "that was certainly dramatic." "Mother. Don't mother me, Sebastian. I've been waiting 3 years for you to stop wallowing in self-pity and actually fight for something. I didn't expect Miss Sinclair to do the fighting for you, but I suppose beggars can't be choosers." She turned to Arabella with something that looked almost like approval. That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever witnessed. Possibly both. Your Grace. We don't have time for apologies or explanations. Lady Pemberton is currently having hysterics in the ladies' retiring room, and her son is demanding satisfaction from my son, which would be amusing if it weren't so tedious. The Duchess's voice was crisp, commanding. What we need now is a plan. The girl has ruined herself, Marcus Sinclair said heavily. What plan can possibly... The obvious one. The Duchess cut him off with an imperious wave. Marriage. Immediately. If Miss Sinclair and my son are betrothed, have been secretly betrothed for weeks. In fact, then her little declaration becomes merely an unconventional announcement of their engagement. Scandalous, certainly, but romantic rather than ruinous. The ton loves a good love story. Arabella felt the room tilt slightly. Your Grace. Lord Thornbury and I are not, we haven't. You will be. You are. As of this moment. The Duchess fixed her son with a look that brooked no argument. Sebastian, you've been mooning over this girl for weeks. Now's your chance to do something useful about it. Propose. Mother, this isn't how... Propose. Now, before Lady Pemberton recovers enough to start spreading alternative narratives. Sebastian looked at Arabella, his expression a complicated mixture of love and frustration and desperate hope. This isn't how I wanted to do this. I know. I wanted to court you properly, to ask your father's permission, to give you the proposal you deserved, with flowers and speeches and... Sebastian. She took his hands in hers. I don't need flowers and speeches. I need you to stop trying to protect me from yourself and let me make my own choices. And your choice is... me? Even now? Even knowing what this will cost you? My choice has been you since the library. She smiled, and it felt like sunshine breaking through clouds. Everything since then has just been waiting for you to catch up. He laughed, a broken, disbelieving sound, and then he was dropping to one knee right there in the parlour, still holding her hands, his eyes bright with something that looked remarkably like joy. Arabella Sinclair, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You are the most stubborn, impossible, magnificent woman I have ever known. You see me clearly and choose me anyway. You make me want to be worthy of being chosen. Will you marry me? Not because society demands it, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Yes. The word came out on a sob. Yes, you impossible man. 1,000 times yes. He surged to his feet and kissed her properly, thoroughly, with no regard whatsoever for their audience, and Arabella kissed him back with equal fervour, her hands fisting in his lapels, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Well, the Duchess said dryly, that's settled. Mr. Sinclair, I believe you have a blessing to give. Lord Hartwell, thank you for witnessing your presence as a respectable member of society will help legitimize the proceedings. Marcus Sinclair was staring at his daughter with an expression that had shifted from anger to something more complex, bewilderment perhaps, or the dawning realization that he had never known her as well as he thought. Bella, he said slowly, is this truly what you want? The Marquis's situation is complicated. His debts. I know about the debts. Arabella untangled herself from Sebastian's arms enough to face her father. I've been helping him develop a plan to address them. It will take time, but it's manageable. And father... She took a breath. I love him. I've never loved anyone before. I didn't know I was capable of it. Please don't ask me to give that up. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he turned to Sebastian. You'll treat her well? With everything I have. Sebastian's voice was steady. Which isn't much at the moment, I know. But I will spend the rest of my life working to deserve her. See that you do. Marcus extended his hand, and after a heartbeat of surprise, Sebastian shook it. "You have my blessing." "God help us all!" The Duchess clapped her hands briskly. "Excellent. Now here's what we're going to do. Sebastian, you will return to the ballroom with Miss Sinclair on your arm and announce your engagement formally. I will inform Lady Pemberton that if she spreads any version of events other than the romantic one, I will ensure she never receives another invitation to anything more prestigious than a country assembly. Mr. Sinclair, you will look proud and happy if it kills you. Lord Hartwell." "I'll offer my congratulations publicly," Hartwell said quietly. "It will help counter any whispers that Miss Sinclair was playing the field, as it were." "You're very kind." Arabella felt a pang of guilt for how she'd treated him. "I'm sorry I couldn't." "Don't be." His smile was rueful but genuine. "You were honest with me." "Which is more than most manage. I wish you every happiness." "Thank you." The Duchess was already herding them toward the door. Come along, come along. We have a scandal to spin into a romance. Sebastian, stop looking terrified. Arabella, stop looking dazed. You're supposed to be deliriously happy." "I am deliriously happy," Arabella said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I just wasn't expecting to be." Sebastian squeezed her hand. "Neither was I. But here we are." "Here we are," she agreed. And together they walked back into the ballroom to face whatever came next. The ton, as the Duchess had predicted, decided to be charmed. Oh, there were whispers, there would always be whispers, but the dominant narrative that emerged from the Ashworth ball was one of romance rather than ruin. The Marquis of Thornbury, reformed by love, had been secretly courting the merchant's clever daughter for weeks. Her declaration on the terrace had been unconventional, certainly, even shocking. But wasn't that just like a love match? So passionate, so impetuous, so delightfully unlike the cold calculations that usually govern society marriages. The fact that Sebastian announced their engagement with obvious joy, that Arabella glowed with unmistakable happiness, that the Duchess of Ashworth herself stood beside them radiating approval. All of this helped shape the story in their favour. By the time the ball ended, Lord Pemberton's accusations had been thoroughly eclipsed by the romance of it all. "You're a miracle worker," Arabella told the Duchess the next morning, over tea that neither of them was drinking. "I don't know how you managed it. I've been managing society for 40 years. This was merely a variation on familiar themes." The Duchess set down her untouched cup. "The question now is what comes next. We're getting married. That much is clear." "Yes, but how? When? The longer the engagement, the more time for the story to shift. I recommend a quick ceremony, quiet, family only, perhaps at Thornbury Manor. Let the ton think you're too impatient to wait. It's more romantic that way." "I'll need to discuss it with Sebastian." "You'll need to discuss many things with Sebastian." The Duchess's voice softened. "My son is not an easy man, Miss Sinclair. He has been broken by circumstances and his own choices, and while he is mending, scars remain. You will need patience with him." "I have patience." "You will need more than you know." The Duchess reached across and touched Arabella's hand briefly. "But I believe you are equal to it. I have believed that since the morning you refused to curtsy properly and told me you were fine when anyone with eyes could see you were exhausted." "I was tired of pretending," Arabella admitted. "With you, it seemed pointless." "Yes, that's why I kept you." The Duchess smiled. "And why I'm giving you my son. Take care of him, Arabella. He needs someone who won't let him destroy himself." "I won't let him. I know. That's why I'm not worried." The wedding took place 3 weeks later at Thornbury Manor. It was smaller than society expected, just family and close friends gathered in the ancient chapel on the estate grounds, but what it lacked in grandeur, it made up for in genuine feeling. Arabella wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit by Louisa's clever hands. Sebastian wore the same suit his father had worn 30 years before, though under considerably happier circumstances. The chapel was filled with spring flowers, their scent mixing with the older smells of stone and wood and centuries of prayers. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting coloured shadows across the worn flagstones. Somewhere outside, birds were singing. Arabella walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. She saw the Duchess dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief she would later deny owning. She saw Louisa beaming from the front pew, her own romantic prospects secure despite, or perhaps because of her sister's dramatic love story. She saw Thomas and Edward fidgeting in their formal clothes, bored by the proceedings but present nonetheless. And she saw Sebastian, waiting at the altar with an expression of such naked wonder that she nearly stumbled. "Breathe," her father murmured. "You can still change your mind." "Never. I didn't think so." He patted her hand. "You'll be happy with him. I can see it now, even if I couldn't before. I know. Your mother would have loved this." His voice cracked slightly. "She always wanted you to find someone who saw how remarkable you are. Father, go. Marry your Marquis. Let someone else hold things together for a change." He kissed her cheek and placed her hand in Sebastian's, and then Arabella was standing before the altar with the man she loved, the man she had chosen against all practical considerations, the man who looked at her like she was the answer to every question he had ever asked. "You're beautiful," Sebastian whispered, as the vicar began the ceremony. "You're biased." "Absolutely. Doesn't make it less true." The vicar cleared his throat pointedly, and they turned their attention to the service. But throughout the ancient words, the solemn promises, the exchange of rings, their eyes kept finding each other, communicating in the silent language they had developed over weeks of ledgers and libraries and stolen moments on moonlit terraces. "I now pronounce you man and wife." Sebastian kissed her softly, reverently, a promise rather than a performance. Behind them, the small congregation burst into applause. Somewhere, the Duchess was definitely not crying. "Lady Thornbury," Sebastian murmured against her lips, "that's going to take some getting used to." "We have time." He pulled back to look at her, and his smile was incandescent. "We have all the time in the world." The first year of marriage was harder than either of them expected. There was the house to manage, Thornbury Manor, with its draughty corridors and leaking roof and centuries of accumulated repairs that had been deferred too long. There were the debts to address slowly, painfully, through careful budgeting and the investment strategies Arabella had developed during those long afternoons in the London Library. There was Sebastian's reputation to rebuild, one social engagement at a time, showing the world that he had truly changed and not just temporarily reformed. And there was the adjustment of two strong-willed people learning to share a life. They fought. Of course they fought about money, about pride, about Sebastian's tendency to withdraw into himself when things got difficult, and Arabella's tendency to take on too much without asking for help. Old habits died hard. Sometimes they lay awake at night on opposite sides of the bed, too angry or too hurt to bridge the distance between them. But they always bridged it eventually. "I'm sorry," Sebastian said one morning, 3 months into their marriage, after a particularly brutal argument about whether to accept a loan from Arabella's father. "I'm not used to partnership, to letting someone else carry some of the weight." "Neither am I." Arabella set down the letter she had been pretending to read. "I'm used to doing everything myself. Having someone who wants to help feels wrong somehow, like I'm not earning my place." "You don't have to earn anything. You're my wife. You belong here." "I know that. Knowing it and feeling it are different things." He crossed the room and took her hands. "Then we'll work on feeling it. Together. As many times as it takes." "As many times as it takes," she agreed. And slowly, Painfully, they learned to be married. Sebastian started involving Arabella in estate decisions, not because she demanded it, but because her insights were genuinely valuable. She had a merchant's daughter's eye for efficiency, for waste, for opportunities others overlooked. Under her guidance, the tenant farms became more productive. The household expenses dropped without any visible reduction in comfort. Small investments began to pay dividends. Arabella learned to let Sebastian take care of her, to sit while he brought her tea, to sleep while he reviewed the accounts she had been up late working on, to accept comfort when she was sad instead of pretending she was fine. It felt strange at first, this business of being cared for. But Sebastian was patient and persistent, and slowly she began to believe that her value was not contingent on her usefulness. They talked. Late at night, in the darkness of their bedroom, they shared things they had never told anyone else. Sebastian spoke of his father, the charming man who had hidden an addiction so successfully that his own family hadn't known until it was too late. Arabella spoke of her mother, the lingering illness, the slow diminishing, the terrible relief when it finally ended, and the guilt that followed. They made each other laugh. Sebastian had a dry wit that emerged when he was relaxed, a talent for absurd observations that caught Arabella off guard and delighted her. She, in turn, had a gift for mimicry that she had suppressed for years, considering it unseemly, but which Sebastian declared one of her finest qualities. And in the darkness, in the privacy of their marriage bed, they discovered pleasures neither had known existed. "I didn't expect this," Arabella admitted one night, lying tangled in Sebastian's arms, her body still humming with satisfaction. "Any of this." "Which part?" "All of it. Being happy. Being wanted." She turned to look at him. "I spent so many years believing I was the practical one, the useful one, the one who didn't get romantic stories. And now you have a husband who wants to spend the rest of his life showing you how wrong you were." He kissed her forehead. "You deserve every romantic story ever written, Arabella. I intend to give them to you. You're ridiculous. You love me anyway." "I do," she admitted. "I really do." The second year brought challenges of a different kind. Arabella discovered she was pregnant in the autumn, a realization that filled her with equal parts joy and terror. She had raised 3 siblings. She knew how to care for children. But raising someone else's children and bringing her own into the world were fundamentally different things. "What if I'm terrible at it?" she asked Sebastian. On a grey November afternoon when the rain streaked the windows and doubt crept in with the cold. "What if I'm so used to being practical that I don't know how to be warm?" "You're the warmest person I know." "You're biased." "Absolutely. Doesn't make it less true." He pulled her close, his hand spreading protectively over her still flat stomach. "You will be a magnificent mother, Arabella. Our child will be loved beyond measure. I have no doubts. I have enough doubts for both of us. Then I'll have enough faith for both of us. That's how this works, isn't it? We balance each other." She wanted to argue, wanted to list all the ways she might fail, all the fears that kept her awake at night. But Sebastian's certainty was a balm she hadn't known she needed. She let herself lean into it, just for a moment. "I love you," she said instead. "I know." He smiled against her hair. "I'm finally catching up." The pregnancy was difficult, more difficult than Arabella had expected. She was sick for months, exhausted constantly, her body doing things she couldn't control no matter how hard she tried. For someone who had spent her life being capable, it was profoundly destabilizing. Sebastian, to his credit, rose to the occasion. He took over household matters she could no longer manage. He sat with her through the worst of the sickness, holding her hair and murmuring nonsense that somehow helped. He read to her when she couldn't sleep, dry treatises on agricultural reform that bored her into unconsciousness. He made her laugh when she wanted to cry, and held her when she cried anyway. "You're good at this," she told him one evening, as he helped her navigate the staircase that had become treacherous as her belly grew. "The caretaking, I didn't expect it." "Neither did I." He steadied her on the final step. "I spent so many years needing to be cared for. It's rather nice to be on the other side. You were never just someone who needed caring for. You were always more than that. I know that now." He kissed her hand. "You taught me." The twins arrived in late spring, howling into the world with an indignation that suggested they found it inadequate to their standards. 2 boys, identical in their wrinkled red faces and surprisingly powerful lungs, both with their father's grey eyes and their mother's auburn hair. "We'll never sleep again," Sebastian said, staring at his sons with an expression of terrified wonder. "We'll manage." Arabella was exhausted beyond anything she had ever experienced, but she couldn't stop smiling. "We always manage. Together. Together," she agreed. The years that followed were full in ways Arabella had never imagined possible. The debts were paid off by the twins' 5th birthday, a milestone Sebastian insisted on celebrating, though Arabella thought throwing a party for financial solvency was excessive. "It's not excessive," he argued. "It's symbolic. We built this together. We should celebrate together." The estate flourished under their combined management, becoming a model of efficiency that other landlords sought to emulate. Sebastian took his seat in the House of Lords and became an unexpected voice for financial reform, arguing for better protections for heirs against inherited debts. 2 daughters followed the twins Charlotte, who had her mother's practical nature and her father's sharp tongue, and Victoria, who was dreamy and gentle and nothing like either of them. The nursery at Thornbury Manor, empty for so long, became the heart of the house, full of noise and chaos and the particular joy that only children could bring. And through it all, Sebastian and Arabella loved each other imperfectly, sometimes painfully, but always truly. "I never thanked you," Sebastian said one evening, as they watched their children play in the garden from the terrace where everything had changed. 8 years had passed since the Ashworth ball. 8 years of building and growing and becoming. "Thanked me for what?" "For ruining me." Arabella laughed. "I believe the official story is that you seduced me. The official story is nonsense, and we both know it." He turned to look at her, his grey eyes soft with love. "You saw me destroying myself and refused to let me continue. You dragged me back to life through sheer stubbornness. You ruined the man I was pretending to be so I could become the man I actually wanted to be." "That's very poetic." "I've been practicing. I can tell." She leaned into him, watching as their eldest boy attempted to teach their youngest daughter the proper way to catch frogs. It would end in tears. It always ended in tears, but the effort was endearing. "I didn't ruin you, Sebastian. I just saw you, the real you, the one underneath all the armor. And you loved him anyway. I loved him because of what I saw, not in spite of it." She tilted her head up to look at him. "You were worth seeing. You're still worth seeing. So are you." He kissed her forehead. "Have I told you that enough? How remarkable you are. How grateful I am every day that you walked into my library in your nightdress and refused to be intimidated. You tell me constantly. It's very tiresome. I'll never stop." "I know." She smiled. "I'm counting on it." The Duchess of Ashworth lived to see her 80th birthday, surrounded by her grandchildren and the family she had fought so hard to preserve. The party was held at Thornbury Manor, the estate she had watched nearly crumble, and then, through sheer force of will and one remarkable young woman's intervention, rise again. All 4 of Sebastian and Arabella's children were in attendance, along with Louisa, now Lady Montague, happily married to the second son of an earl, and her 3 children, and Edward, a barrister in London, and Thomas, managing the Sinclair textile empire with their father's blessing. It was chaos, of course. It was always chaos when the family gathered. But it was the good kind of chaos, the kind that meant you were never alone, never forgotten, never invisible. "She's happy," the Duchess observed to Arabella, watching as young Charlotte attempted to organize a game that her brothers were determinedly sabotaging. "She'll be a force to reckon with some day." "She already is. She gets it from you." "She gets it from you." The Duchess's voice was firm. "I merely provided the opportunity. You provided the example." Arabella felt tears prick at her eyes. "Your Grace." "None of that. You've been calling me mother for 6 years now. Don't revert to formality just because I'm saying something kind." The Duchess reached out and took Arabella's hand. "I meant what I said all those years ago. I knew from the moment you walked into my house that you would save my son. I just didn't realize you'd save the rest of us too." "I haven't saved anyone. I've just managed things." "Yes, that's what saving looks like sometimes. Not dramatic rescues or grand gestures. Just showing up, day after day, managing things until they're better." The Duchess squeezed her hand. "You're a remarkable woman, Arabella. I'm proud to call you daughter. I'm proud to be called." The tears were falling now, and Arabella didn't try to stop them. "Thank you for everything, for giving me a chance, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." "That's what mothers do." The Duchess smiled. "The good ones, anyway." Sebastian appeared at Arabella's elbow, looking harried. "Charlotte has declared war on the boys. Victoria is crying because someone stepped on a flower, and father is trying to teach the Montague children Latin. I need reinforcements. Duty calls." Arabella wiped her eyes and stood. "Coming, Your Grace?" "In a moment. I want to enjoy the view a little longer." The Duchess waved them away. "Go. Save your family from itself. I'll be there shortly." Arabella and Sebastian walked back toward the house together, their hands intertwined, their steps matched after 8 years of walking side by side. "What were you and Mother talking about?" Sebastian asked. "Saving people. Managing things. The usual. She's sentimental under all that iron. Don't tell anyone." "I wouldn't dream of it." Arabella stopped walking, turning to face him. "Sebastian." "Yes?" "I love you. I don't say it enough. You say it constantly. It's very tiresome." His eyes were bright with humor and something deeper. "But please, never stop." "I won't." She kissed him, soft and sweet, in full view of anyone who might be watching. Let them talk. Let them gossip. She was done caring what society thought. She had built a life with this man, a family, a future. That was worth more than any reputation. "Come on," Sebastian said, pulling back reluctantly. "Our daughter is probably marshalling troops as we speak. We should intervene before she conquers the Rose Garden." "She's 8. How much damage could she do?" "She's your daughter. The possibilities are endless." They walked into the house together, into the noise and chaos and wonderful mess of their family. Behind them, the Duchess watched from the terrace, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She remembered the girl who had walked into her home 8 years ago, proud, exhausted, invisible even to herself. She remembered seeing something remarkable beneath the practical exterior, something worth nurturing, worth protecting, worth fighting for. She remembered her own words, spoken in the heat of scandal and the clarity of certainty. Good. Now he has to marry her. It had been, she reflected, the best thing she had ever said. That night, After the children were finally asleep and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Arabella found Sebastian on the terrace overlooking the garden. It had become their place, somehow this particular spot where they could watch the stars emerge and remember all the terraces that had led them here. The London townhouse, where they had first kissed in desperation. The Pemberton ball, where Arabella had ruined herself to save him. And now here, at Thornbury Manor, the home they had rebuilt together. "The children are asleep," she said, joining him at the balustrade. "All of them? Even Charlotte? I had to negotiate. She gets an extra story tomorrow. We're raising a politician. We're raising a force of nature." Arabella leaned into his side. "What are you thinking about?" "Everything. Nothing." He wrapped an arm around her. "How lucky I am. How close I came to losing all of this. You didn't lose it. Because of you." He turned to face her. "I never forget that, Arabella. Not for a single day. You saved me when I didn't deserve saving. You saw something worth loving when I couldn't see anything at all. You were always worth loving. You just needed someone to remind you. And you've been reminding me every day for 8 years. I plan to keep reminding you for at least 8 more. She smiled. "Maybe longer, if you behave." "I'll do my best." He kissed her forehead. "No promises." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the moon rise over the garden where their children would play tomorrow. Somewhere in the house, one of the twins coughed in his sleep. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called to its mate. "Do you ever regret it?" Sebastian asked quietly. "The scandal? The way it happened? If you could go back—" "I'd do it again," Arabella said without hesitation. "Every single moment of it. The scandal, the chaos, the terrifying leap into uncertainty. I'd ruin you again in a heartbeat." "Promise?" She turned in his arms, looking up at the face she loved more than she had ever thought possible. This complicated, wounded, magnificent man who had seen her when no one else did, who had chosen her when he could have chosen easier, who had built a life with her brick by brick and day by day. "Promise," she said. And she kept that promise for the rest of their lives.